Welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Whether you're a pastor, youth leader, ministry volunteer, parent, or student, we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource for equipping and encouragement when it comes to your ministry and leadership influence. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name is Eric and I'll be your host for today's conversation. We're super excited to have with us Jaime Blair. Jaime is RAHAB Ministries CEO. I understand, Jaime, RAHAB is an acronym, but yes. I sometimes struggle to remember what that's for. Tell us, what does RAHAB stand for?
Yeah. So RAHAB is an acronym. It stands for Reaching Above Hopelessness and Brokenness. It's also the name of Rahab, the prostitute from the Old Testament, who assisted God's people who ended up in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. So it's also a really clear point to, it might look like the unexpected person or the sex work person, but yet Jesus came from that line. The worthiness is still there. And so it's a really clear way to point to the fact that that has no bearing on worth and value and ushers us right into the life of Jesus Christ.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Well, RAHAB as an organization seeks to provide Christ-centered transformational services to those who are affected by sex trafficking in Northeast Ohio. So guess what, guys? Today, we're talking about sex trafficking. Well,
yes.
Jaime, thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation. Super important. And for a lot of people, this is an area of really misunderstanding. My wife recently joined the team at RAHAB. So she's still the intro on our podcast here. She does the intro and outro, but she doesn't work at Momentum anymore.
No,
so
she does not.
You stole her.
I did.
You took my work wife.
I would like to say Jesus gave her an invitation and invited her to RAHAB.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I told her I was going to tease you a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So, Jaime, let's do some rapid fire questions here just to get to know you a little bit. And then I'll let you kind of go through some of the things your ministries does. Okay? All right. You ready?
Yes.
Favorite season and why? We'll start with an easy one.
Favorite season is fall because it is absolutely stunningly beautiful outside. The Lord displays artwork like no other season. The sound, the crisp air, knee socks, coffee shops, fires. Fall is absolutely the best.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're a bonfire girl.
Yeah. And I was born in
S'mores?
October. Oh, s'mores.
Okay.
All day long s'mores.
All right.
Yeah.
My kids they just want to do a bonfire so they can have s'mores.
Absolutely.
That's really
You should never sit by a fire without eating a s'more.
All right.
What's
I
the
like
point?
It.
Yeah.
I like it. Chick-fil-A or Popeyes?
Chick-fil-A.
This is like my favorite question.
Really?
Some people tease me because I'm a Popeyes, I don't know, fanatic.
Really?
I just think Chick-fil-A's a little overrated.
Why? Why though?
Because like the bun is soggy, like it's consistent. That's where everybody always goes. I know. People are like don't at me like here. Like
a ministry
it's
declining.
I'm just saying, like, I think
Chick-fil-A.
some people like it because it's Christian and it's the Lord's chicken. I understand. But I'm like, have you tried the Popeyes chicken sandwich? Just go try it. I can't even get my wife to try it. Like, just go try it.
I would try it, but I would say, have you had Chick-fil-A's breakfast?
I have.
Okay.
And it's
you're
good.
Still, yes, it's
It
very
is good.
Yes,
it is
the
good.
biscuit, the chicken, the egg, the cheese. The thing's this big.
I'm not knocking Chick-fil-A.
it's
I'm
just
just
not
saying,
as good.
if I'm going to get a chicken sandwich, or even chicken tenders, I'd probably rather get Popeyes.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
To each their own.
Personal preference, yeah. Agree to disagree. That's
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right. First concert you ever went to?
AC/DC.
What?
Yes. And I didn't realize that the energy was nonstop. I was like, this is phenomenal.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
I was not expecting
I saw a lot of things I didn't also expect to see there. So it was an eye-opening experience, but I had never been and I got invited. And
Oh, my.
Yeah, it was
right.
It was interesting for sure.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Best book you've read lately?
The best book I've read is a children's book. It is called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And it is incredible, and I highly recommend both for children and adults.
Nice.
Yes.
All right.
Profound truths in there for all of us.
I love books like that.
Yeah.
We recently found one like that. I was telling you a little bit about this a couple minutes ago, but it's called The Moon is Always Round.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who it's written by, but phenomenal truths, kind of like what you're saying. Transferable principles for parents and kids.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you for playing my rapid fire game.
Yes. Those are the light topics for the day.
Yes. We'll, I think in a topic that's so heavy with like sex trafficking and thinking about some of this, it's good to like laugh and think about like, maybe not AC/DC, but Chick-fil-A for like
fall.
Yeah,
s'mores.
there you go. Fall and s'mores and bonfires. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So Jamie, how long have you been on staff? You're obviously the CEO. What did you do prior to joining RAHAB? Kind of give us your context there.
I love this question. I'm going to take you on a little ride because God wrote this story. And even if you don't want to believe in God, when I look at all the different pieces of this, I'm like, someone was writing this. This is a story that was written. So I first heard about sex trafficking in 2006. Somebody brought me a pamphlet from International Justice Mission. I wasn't even there at the conference. I didn't have, and I looked at it and I was unaware that people were still selling people.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. And my first thought was, I want to do something. Like, I want to fight human trafficking. And then I thought, well, it's overseas and I don't speak a foreign language. I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea how I'm going to have anything to do with this. And a few years later, I ended up in law school, and I still had no idea that it was not over there, that it was also here. And I went to law school because I wanted to help people. And my dream was to get to the juvenile court. And the Lord opened an opportunity for me to work there by invitation. There's invitation all over the story. I did not apply to work there. I got invited by the judge to come work for her. Wow. And I arrived there in September of 2012. In December of 2012, the FBI comes to the juvenile court and has a meeting to explain to us that we have human trafficking in Summit County. And I'm sitting in the room, and I'm at the right time at the right place, and the judge invites me to start ground level to create some way to identify kids that are coming through our doors, and how do we assess them, and how do we help them, what do they need? And so I'm sitting in the room, and I'm thinking, man, 3 years ago, it was my desire to do something about human trafficking, and now I'm sitting here and someone's saying, do you want to do something to figure out how to help the kids right here?
Wow.
And I was, talk about like, where did that come from? So I was on the ground level of helping create Restore Court, which is a specialized docket for juveniles that are in the justice system in Summit County, and realized, there weren't a lot of people that provided human trafficking services in Summit County. And so we reached out to RAHAB Ministries knowing that they didn't serve kids and just wanted to consult with them, right? Because if a lot of your adults got into this as juveniles, what do you know that would be helpful for us in serving them? Like, what do we say? What don't we say? What do they need? So we reached out to RAHAB Ministries to consult with them. And through that meeting, Becky Moreland, who is the founder of RAHAB Ministries and became a really great friend of mine, volunteered to be the mentor service for our kids on the docket. And so she hired somebody and added youth programming to RAHAB that they didn't previously have. And they were a primary partner for us on the Summit County Juvenile Court docket. And so as a court worker, I got to watch RAHAB come into that space and love those kids. And it was the most valuable piece of that program, hands down. And then the data ended up reflecting that as well. Kids that were connected to mentors were having higher success rates. They were getting through the program quicker than kids that didn't have a mentor. They were going to school. They were attending counseling. There was something to that relationship that was making an impact. And so I saw it from the court side. I was then invited to be a board member at RAHAB, and I did that for a couple years, until I then received the invitation to be a magistrate on that Restore Court docket that I got to help create. So
fun.
It is so fun. I'm like, what is happening? I didn't ask for any of these. I did not make an ask for any of these. So I became the magistrate for the Restore Court docket, and I couldn't be a board member anymore because there was a conflict. And somebody invited me at that time to be a strip club outreach volunteer. And I was like, oh, I actually don't know what I'm going to do in the strip club. I don't understand.
Right.
Like, what am I going to say? What do they, like, what do I even have to offer? What do you wear? Like, what happens from a ministry perspective in the strip club? And I went one time and got completely hooked. And I did that for 5 years. And eventually, and this is an important part of the story, my dad had dementia, and at the end of 2020, he died. And it was grief was such a transformational part of my own life. I understood trauma more. I understood what it felt like to feel traumatized in my body and out in the world. I had a different understanding of loss and pain, and it gave me an ability to relate to the people who have grief and pain. So I eventually left my job at the court, and I ended up representing victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault. But when I was in the space with them as their attorney, I knew what they needed. They needed me to slow down, and they needed me to understand what it feels like when you're sitting in the space traumatized. And so my life experiences kind of shaped and prepared me for understanding and how to be in the space with them. So I did that for a year, and I thought, the Lord has equipped me very clearly for this. And then one day I got a call from the board of RAHAB saying, hey, we would like you to consider the CEO position. And I said, that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with me, right? I'm a lawyer. I've been in the legal field for all the years. This is what I went to school for. I've never thought about being a CEO.
Right.
I don't really think so, but thanks for calling. And then I said, the one thing I know about the Lord is things unfold, right? And so I won't shut the door, and I'll just let you know if the Lord does anything. So after about a 3-month process, I ended up saying yes to that and coming on board. At that time, I came in November 2022, and I've been involved with RAHAB for about 8 years, and now I'm just on staff. So God
Amazing.
He wrote that whole thing, and I feel like I had almost no part of it. It was just unfolding and happening kind of to me, and he just kept equipping me and inviting me and bringing me further into the space. And what I think is important about that, for people listening as well, is there's a moment when I very first heard about human trafficking that I didn't know it existed. And when I heard about it, the desire was there to do something. And God is the one who gives us the desires of our heart. Like, those desires are in there because he put them there, right? So if you hear about it for the first time and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do something, that's there on purpose, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a way for you to carry that out because God is doing a thing there. And so just recognizing that desire came from him, and then he supplied everything I needed to end up here. So
that's
here
so
we are.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
It
love
is
that.
a cool story. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, Jamie. Thank you for sharing that story and taking us on that journey. That I have so many questions now. Let's start with explain what strip club outreach is, because you did drop that in there.
Yes.
And I'm sure some of our listeners are going, hang on, go back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a husband whose wife now works for RAHAB, she just went on her first strip club outreach
and loved
ministry,
it.
And she's probably hooked now too.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm curious.
Yes, as you should be. We all should be.
Yes.
I used to put it on my calendar and it would say strip club, and then I'm like, outreach, strip club outreach. I'm like, heaven forbid I die and someone looks at my calendar and thinks I went to the strip club every Friday. Strip club outreach is such an obvious and beautiful opportunity to gain proximity with people who are not going to come to the doors of the church. It is one of those experiences where Jesus himself goes to the dark places that people aren't really interested in going, maybe with the light. And it's the easiest way to connect that I've ever experienced in my entire life, because by very fact that there is proximity, the women feel not judged and openness, because I'm standing in the same little dressing room as you are standing. We are right next to each other. Already, before I say a word, I am communicating that you're not too dirty for me, that this place is not too much for me, that we're both just here. And so the ability to connect is so strong in there.
Yes.
The women are super receptive because a lot of people don't treat them with dignity. They're not receiving kindness. Anything they do receive, they have to give something in exchange. And so it's like, man, what a beautiful space to come in and just offer love and kindness. When we bring them food, when we bring them gifts, they always say, what do I owe you? And we say nothing, right? And then they ask, why are you here?
Yes.
And I love that question.
Wow.
Because you're worthy of love, and we're not trying to convert them. We don't have a goal for them. We are being Jesus Christ in the space, and he does the rest. And so they call us the church ladies when we go in there. In all the clubs, I don't know how, we just look maybe like the church ladies. In some of our Cleveland clubs, there's a DJ in one of the Cleveland clubs that we go into, and we have very good rapport with their staff and their managers. And when we go in, they yell, "RAHAB in the house!" And we walk through there, and they're like waving and cheering, and it's like an unexpected thing that you're you're like,
that's really fun.
It's awesome. And then there's opportunities in those spaces. They do want to pour out what's hard. They do want to pour out what's heavy. Like, they're there for it. So the church ladies come in and they run over and they want to talk about what's hard. And it's just like, man, this couldn't be any simpler or easier of a way to connect with people. And they tell us on repeat that they don't feel accepted. They do feel shame. They do feel, condemnation from people in their family, people in the church. And then they say, but not you guys. You guys never judge us. And I'm like, but we are the church. Like, we're just in your space. And so it's like such a beautiful opportunity to connect. And I will say, I receive more love and kindness from the women in those spaces than any other. When I go to the grocery store, they're not anywhere as near as nice to me out there in that space than when I come into the clubs, and so it's just beautiful. Yeah. It's awesome.
There's a lot to unpack there, and we probably don't have time, but because I want to learn more about the rest of your ministry. Give us kind of a brief overview of your organization, the various ministries that you offer. Kind of what's the goal of how you work through that partnership with those women?
I like that question. So we're in 4 counties. We're in Summit County, Stark County, Cuyahoga County, and Mahoning counties.
All in Ohio.
All in Ohio, yes. Yeah. And I will just drop it into 3 buckets. We serve adults, we serve youth, and then we also do training. So our adult services, we have outreach that includes going out into the strip clubs, going onto the streets. So we have teams of people that walk the streets and we meet people out there. And then we also go into several jails and community-based correctional facilities.
Okay.
We do Bible studies in there. We invite them to our drop-in. We have a drop-in home in Canton and in Akron, and that's where a lot of the relationship gets to happen. So if you come to our drop-in, it's not a residential. You can drop in there Monday through Friday. You can get a shower. You can get a warm meal. You can get clothing. You can get hygiene products. But really, why the women are there is because there's safety and there's love. We have Bible study Monday through Friday. We share with them the hope and love of Jesus Christ. We show love to them in that space, and it's community. That's where they come to know that these are my people. I can come here consistently. Some of them come and just sleep on the couch because there's not a safe space to sleep, right? You can't just sleep on the couch in the places that they're coming from because that's going to result in a lot of things that you didn't ask for. So they might just come and sleep on the couch, but those drop-in homes are where you get to have a little bit of conversation on the streets and in the clubs, but if you can get them to the drop-in, you can really build relationship with them, and they get to build relationship with each other. So that's our adult ministry, and they kind of are created to work in tandem. We serve youth both through the Summit County Juvenile Court and the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court, and we have mentoring centers, one in Akron and one in Cleveland, where kids can come to those spaces. It's kind of hard for people to conceive of what a human trafficking juvenile is, but they're very much kids who might not have always got to engage in things that are kids. So they want to play games, they want to paint nails, they want to make cookies. It's like a space they can come where they are safe and where they can just be them. Mentoring is a thing, that's what we call it. It really is being a consistent, safe person. We don't have goals for them, we don't push them, we're there to be a kind, consistent, loving presence in their life. And so they love our mentoring centers. We also have a program called The Willows, and it serves youth and their whole family. The point of The Willows is to prevent kids from being removed from the home. So it's kind of wraparound services for the whole family in an attempt to keep that kid in the home. Also to train up foster families and things of that nature, so that if we do have an opportunity to send a kid outside of their home, that it doesn't have to be a residential facility. And then our last piece is training. So we do schools, we do churches, we do community events. Pretty much anybody who asks, there's a wide variety of contexts, but we equip people to understand what it is and connect them to what they can do about it. So those are our 3 primary buckets.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So in all of those areas, as I'm trying to think through from our listeners' perspective, and as I most recently was kind of in this understanding of my wife explaining to me, like, hey, I'm going to work for RAHAB, and they do sex trafficking and rescuing women and juveniles, and like, hang on. There's a lot of misconceptions, especially in the church. And as I've been a youth pastor for a long time and partnered with churches, I think oftentimes people think like, okay, when I'm going through a city, I got to lock my doors so I don't get snatched out of my car, or what you see on TV or the movies. I've heard of IJM, like I'm familiar with that. Some of the human trafficking stuff that they've done and the awareness. And even if you're like, I think I'm knowledgeable a little bit. What are still some of those misconceptions that people might have?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to say, and it's just going to continue to be weaved in this entire conversation is, and this is not my phrase, but I learned it at human trafficking training and have seen it play out. It is through relationship that we are hurt, and it is through relationship that we heal. And so the solution is directly tied to the cause, and it looks very different domestically. There are, over in other countries, different contexts where it might look similar to the movies, where people are maybe snatched or kind of like forced to stay in some specific location or sold away from their families. That does happen.
Yes.
Domestically, what we find is really, it's largely relationship based. It has nothing to do with crossing borders. It has nothing to do with necessarily physical restraint, but it has a lot to do with this vulnerability. So there are 3 ingredients for trafficking. It is a vulnerable person, somebody willing to exploit, and a demand. And if you just pause for a minute and think about those, I can't think of a single community where there are not those 3.
Yeah,
right?
say those 3 again.
A vulnerable person,
Okay.
someone willing to exploit, and demand. And so where you have that, you're going to have trafficking. So one of the misconceptions is that it's something, there are, and I'm going to run you a little bit through an HT 101, which is just to explain the different kinds, because there is what we call guerrilla. It's based on a violent crime where you might get kidnapped as a start, but that's very rare here. What is most common is what we call finesse or Romeo or boyfriend trafficking, where it's really this attempt to get you to believe that I love you, that you can trust me, that I'm going to meet your needs, to grow dependence on me, grooming, right? There's this whole process of grooming so that you think that we're in this relationship and that I love you. And what I'm really doing is seeing that you have a vulnerability and I'm going to exploit it. Not one of the kids that we ever served in the juvenile court, not one of them ever referred to their trafficker as anything other than their boyfriend. And we had to be very careful, not even in court, to reference them as a trafficker, because they just, like, what are you talking about, right? They don't identify with the term trafficking. They don't identify him as a trafficker. They believe that to be their boyfriend. And so that's really the primary reason that people get into it. Polaris Project is one of the resources that is excellent for statistics. And in 2020, they found that 39% of trafficking victims were recruited via an intimate partner or a marriage proposal. So these are not people you don't know. This is not walking down the street and feeling you're in danger. This is, I'm in relationship with this person and had no idea that this is what was happening. Familial trafficking also is significant. In that same study, they found 42% of trafficking victims were recruited by their family, and 80% of those trafficked by family members were trafficked under the age of 10. So family trafficking looks more like this is kind of part of the family system. Grandma might have been trafficked, mom was in it. They're used to this. It might be exchanged for shelter. It might be exchanged for drugs. It might be exchanged for money to pay bills. And they somehow get into this culture where it's normalized, right? So if you're young and mom was exploited by somebody and grandma, like, this isn't, it feels normal, just like abuse does. And so familial trafficking is more common than people realize. And then a final way is peer-to-peer recruiting. So that might be through schools, friendships. One of the things we saw is residential facilities in our detention centers. When some of our trafficked girls would end up in there, they end up connecting the other people they meet to their network, right? So again, they don't view this as trafficking. This is their network of people, right? So these are people that help me meet my needs. I get things from them. They show up and protect me when I need it. So they feel like they're connecting them to their community and their network, but they're ending up recruiting them into trafficking. So that's also not uncommon.
That's heartbreaking.
It's mind-blowing.
You said 80%?
80%
are under 10.
of those who are trafficked by their family.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so family trafficking is more so the younger kids that are being trafficked by their family are under 10.
Regardless. That's awful.
Yeah. But
That's awful.
But to again, like, zoom out and think about it in terms of, if this is normal to you and you are desperate for shelter, right? And you think, I've got this many kids and I have no way to feed them, and this happened to me, it's not that big of a stretch to provide. It's essentially providing sexual access to your kid, right?
Yeah.
And you get something in exchange. And so it's just part of the survival system, and they wouldn't even identify themselves as traffickers, right?
Yeah. Jamie, go into a little bit. One of the things that I remember Bethany explaining to me that like helped the light click in my head of the brokenness and the poverty. And I think for every person who's listening, parents, pastors, like across the country, like, think in your context as you listen to this, because it is transferable. This is happening in your community. Like even Bethany was even explaining, like, we drive past one of the strip clubs that she went to almost every day. And I had no idea. I thought it was an abandoned building. I had no idea.
Yeah.
There's not signs.
Right.
So explain that, like the connection there between poverty. Go a little bit deeper in that, the pathway, the process, the thought process, even for those people, and the addiction that comes from all of that. Like, yeah.
Poverty is one, but again, it's really not an economic issue, but that's a very clear way that we become vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So it's about vulnerability.
Okay.
One of the significant ones is trauma. So we do look at this, it's called the ACEs. It was a study of adverse childhood experiences that actually was created by the health industry for insurance purposes so that they could figure out what's the cost of these kinds of trauma in health, terms of health.
Wow.
So it's looking at emotional neglect, physical abuse, divorce. There's 10 primary things that we're looking at, but any of those kinds of experiences are going to create those vulnerabilities. Trauma is a significant one, history of sexual abuse, history of involvement with children's services in your family. But I hesitate to say it is largely those because of the vulnerability, but even if you are in an affluent culture or you don't have poverty, it's happening there too, because what's really happening, again, as I started, this is a relationship-based thing. So it's the thing that drives you towards somebody who is unhealthy for you, but you need something from them for yourself. So what I like to boil it down to is maybe not one of those things in particular, but there's this lack of belonging or lack of love that you have. And you are willing to look in those places or to have it provided by that person. And that makes you most vulnerable to being exploited in this way, because regardless if you have dollars or regardless if you've been sexually abused or any of those things, yes, those are factors. But the reason it can happen to anybody is because you might have kids in your youth group. You might have, peers at school who are desperate for attention, desperate to feel valued, desperate for connection in a sense of belonging. And those kids are at risk for these types of things.
Gotcha.
So it's a lot to do with, it's a psychological thing that happens here and here that just ropes people in ways that they didn't expect to get roped in.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Those, you could kind of put those in the category of like, would be some lead indicators where someone might be able to be identifying those situations. Are there other things that, like, pastors, especially in some of these churches that Momentum partners with, what could they look for those lead indicators for somebody who might be vulnerable to being trafficked? Yeah.
And again, it's not going to be that, like, I'm driving down the road and this person looks like they might be in danger because, it's again going to be relationship based. So most likely it's going to be kids that you have relationship with or have knowledge of. I would say ask about their relationships and listen very well. One of the things I had to learn from the court side is questions I didn't actually want to know the answer to, like, tell me what it is that you love about him. I don't actually want to sit here and listen to you tell me all the great things about this guy that is your boyfriend, but it's important that I listen to that, because what you're going to tell me is the thing that he's providing for you. He meets your physical needs. He tells you that you're beautiful and no one ever did. And so really getting to the root of listening to, like, what is it that this kid is missing and what is being provided in this relationship. A good question to ask is, who takes care of you? So a lot of our kids, if they would be out on the run, there's kids with chaos in their life. When you're on the run, who's taking care of you, right? Because that person is not doing it for free. Kids don't just get free handouts and spaces to stay because people are kind-hearted. They're being taken care of, and then they're being exploited. And so just asking those questions. One really crucial thing that I learned in training from a man, for us to understand, it absolutely happens to men and boys all the time. It's far more difficult to identify because they are not as likely to disclose. So we had to actually change the way we assessed kids. You can ask questions to girls such as, tell me about a time when you felt unsafe. They will pour out all kinds of information. If you ask a boy that, and he's not going to say that because he doesn't want to acknowledge that he was weak or felt unsafe, so he's not going to answer that question. So you kind of have to come at it differently. But one of the questions I learned in training from a male who had been trafficked is about violence. Ask about violence. tell me what you know about violence. This particular guy told us that he had it's called a CASA. It's a court-appointed special advocate. His CASA was driving the car listening to one of his CDs with him, and it was full of violence. And the CASA just asked that question, what do you know about violence? And then he felt free to begin to articulate the violent experiences he had, which led to that violence turned into sexual exploitation. And it's like, if you just said, tell me about a time when you weren't safe, that boy is less inclined to answer that question because they are trained to not admit that they felt unsafe because that's weak. And so again, asking questions, I think asking questions about boundaries, because there's going to be an element of control, right? What they're able to do and what they have freedom to do and who they're allowed to talk to is very much controlled by that person. So if there's controlling dynamics in the relationship, tune in, pay attention. The other thing is, just like we were talking about strip clubs and online sex work, people might not assume, I actually think most people assume that's voluntary. If you know somebody who's working a strip club or engages in those online platforms, it very quickly turns to something involuntary. In my years of strip club ministry, we would sit outside the club in our car and we would pray before we would go in. And I don't know how many times a car would pull up and we'd watch one of our girls come out of the club, get in the car and leave. And then through relationship got to understand that's not an option. Like, you need to feed your kids. You're going to work here. You're going to go get in that car at 8:00 and go on a date. Right. And so she doesn't want to do that, but what's her alternative? You know? So if you know somebody in those industries, don't assume that it's voluntary. And then again, I would say, pay attention to those vulnerability factors. So the traffickers are looking for vulnerability. That's what you can look for.
Yeah.
If you want to know if somebody is in that position, look at their vulnerability factors. Yeah.
That's so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay, what can be done? Like, what can we do as churches, as leaders? Obviously, for those here in Northeast Ohio, get in touch with RAHAB.
Yes.
Partner up. Like,
yes.
Bring you guys in for some of these trainings that you're doing. Some amazing resources that are available. But for others, maybe outside of this region, what can churches do? How do they get involved?
Yeah.
How can they help?
Okay. I have a lot of ways, but I want to say, when I first heard this question, it kind of makes me a little cringy because what happens is people hear a word like sex trafficking and what can I do? And then there's not often a lot of follow through, right? Like,
Perfect.
That's the thing. So the movie, The Sound of Freedom, came out. I'm out of the loop on all social anything that's happening in the world. I didn't even know the movie was out, but all of a sudden we started getting all of these inquiries and contacts. What about trafficking? What about trafficking? Then a few weeks later, the Barbie movie came out and everybody left The Sound of Freedom and we were talking about Barbie. And I was like, wow, that was such a quick shift. Like, everyone's like, human trafficking. Oh my gosh, what can we do? And then it was like, did you know this Barbie movie came out? And I came to work and that's how I learned anything from anyone.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, we're on to Barbie. And it was just like such a like, oh, okay, right? Like, we hear about it. It's profound. It should be shocking that people are selling people in the year 2024, that people are literally selling people. But yet, often when I get that question, I'm like, oh boy, is anybody going to actually do anything? So just disclosing, that's how that feels.
Thank you for the honesty.
Yeah. Because I was like, I could answer this question, but is anybody going to do anything?
No, I think that is a totally valid call out because that's our human nature.
Yeah. Yes.
And so for us to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, like that.
You actually can do something though.
Yes.
Like, you can actually follow through. And I have a lot of things in those contexts that we were just talking about for people that are in ministry to adolescents. Be a consistent, safe relationship for those kids.
Yeah.
There is a prevention to that. There is statistically a way to avoid kids ending up there if they have a consistent adult, if they have a safe place to be, if they feel valued by someone. They're less likely to have someone convince them that you're valuable because I said you are, right?
Yeah.
So that's huge for kids and adults. Volunteer in a place that may not be trafficking related. So that court-appointed special advocacy, those are people that are appointed because a kid's juvenile justice involved, or I'm sorry, CSB is involved, and they may be removed from their home, they may not, but those kids are very, very high risk for being trafficked. And if you want to do something about trafficking, you could be a CASA and you could be that safe, stable person in their life before they end up on this end of trafficking. Big brothers, big sisters, mentoring programs, things of that nature. I would love if we had enough safe adults to really pour into kids and be value givers for them before we ended up treating them on a human trafficking docket. Most of the victims get into this as an adolescent. The average age is about 14. So again, those teenagers are the ones at highest risk for being trafficked. And so you can invest in them and pour into them before that happens. I would say volunteer in an organization like RAHAB. To my point earlier, we are currently 25 mentors short of really being able to cover relationships with these kids where it's not staff-based. So these programs were designed to be connected to a volunteer, not a staff member per se. And the point is to create a relationship that may be ongoing, like a real relationship. And so it was built with the idea that people will care about this, they will hear about it, and they will invest in these kids. And now we're 25 mentors short. So if you want to do something, get the training and sign up to be a mentor, because these kids are in need of somebody to pour into them and have a relationship with them. The other thing I would say is give. We have drop-in homes that require heat and lights and hygiene products and clothing and food. We feed them every time we're with them. So if you don't feel inclined to do those parts that are direct contact, we will take your resources and we will turn it into pouring out for the people. So we have vehicles, we have all these things that go into caring for the women that we encounter. Give. We are always in need of that as well.
So giving, you're talking both financially and the resources that you would use to distribute.
Any sort of donations. We always need the hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, body wash, toothpaste, and we give out full-size products. We don't give travel, right? Who wants to use travel toothpaste and travel, right? So they need these things. Underwears and bras, they don't have them. And the next time you see them, they won't have them. And so we are always in need of that. We give out clothes at both of our drop-in homes. I think they get 8 items per week, which is a lot. I don't get 8 items of clothing per week. And so it's, but when you see them again, right, where are those clothes? And so that need is always there.
Okay. Thank you. That's super helpful. All right. So for church leaders, pastors, parents that are in other communities outside of Northeast Ohio, how do they find an organization that they can get involved with in their community? Is RAHAB a local thing, or is this national? Do they Google sex trafficking? How help them out, help them find, how can they find a good organization that's Christ-centered that they can partner with?
I would say I would like to provide you a list of links that people can go to, because this is national audience and we are very familiar with the Northeast Ohio resources. But there are many even in the state of Ohio, and you begin to realize, there's people doing this work. Cool. So I'll provide you that link, and you can find agencies all across the country that are engaging the work.
Good. We will put that in the link in the bio. So there you go. Good. Jaime, thank you. Any other trusted resources that you would recommend to our listeners that maybe are available online, or something even through your website? I did see, I'll give you a plug because you might not do this, but you guys have a blog. You guys have your social media. If you're not, go check that out.
RAHAB-ministries.org.
There you go. There's amazing resources. I've read through some of those, even when Bethany was like, I think I want to do this RAHAB thing. I'm like, wait, hang on a second. Let me learn. And so there's amazing articles on there that are blog entries that you guys have written that help continue this conversation and equip your mind.
I think there's endless resources online, truly. Once you get started digging into it, there are endless resources to learn more and to understand it.
Good. Any specific you'd point people to just right off the bat?
No, I would want to provide you a whole link.
All right. We're going to link to all that.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. Jaime, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. For our listeners, I'm sure you have lots of questions. I'm sure you can reach out to Jaime at RAHAB, but also others in your area. Learn more about this. Okay. Friends, if I can challenge you on one thing, do your homework. Get involved. This stuff is a big deal. It is happening in our communities. It breaks my heart, honestly, to think about. And so I think when God, I love you sharing that story of how you got involved in this. When God puts something in your heart and in your mind, do something about it. He calls us to obedience. James says, we who know the good we ought to do, and yet doesn't, it's sin. And so if this is something, as you're listening to this conversation and you're feeling the Holy Spirit nudge you, go act on it. Go do what God's calling you to do. Pray
Can
about
I jump
that,
in
obviously.
on you
Yes,
there?
please. Yes.
So just a couple points as it relates to how to help ministry-wise. There is a significant connection between porn and sexual exploitation. So I would say if you are in ministry, really lean in and hold accountable those who are engaged in porn or commercial sex of any kind. I would say if you are a parent of a boy, to teach them to value and respect women, because again, there's this direct correlation between what's normalized and what we believe in our minds about women and women in sex work. It really directly impacts how we engage. And the other thing about that parents can do is that social media, between 2019 and 2020, the increase in recruitment in Facebook was 125% increase. And on Instagram, the increase in recruitment was 95% increase in the years 2019 and 2020. So again, being the unpopular parent who is paying attention, who is monitoring, I always say, if you're parenting a teenager and at some point they don't hate you, you might be their friend, because anytime we try to instill boundaries and introduce things that are healthy, adolescents are often resistant to that for all the developmental reasons, but there's so many things you can do on that ground level of paying attention, leaning in, challenging, holding accountable. But there's always that correlation between how we view women, how we view sex. One of the survivors in one of the trainings we went to said, and I love this because I was like, wow, that's simple, profound. Sex work by nature is coercive because if someone wants to have sex with you, you don't have to pay them, right? And so the assumption that the women at the strip clubs or people involved in porn and all that are doing this voluntarily is just a misnomer. It's not. And so if men are there and they're engaging these things and they think that this is victimless, it is not. They need to become aware that this is victimizing people and they're being exploited. So just leaning into those conversations and challenging each other as men as well. And then, being that value, life-giving, hope-bringing voice to people is tremendous. That they can have hope to leave that relationship, that they can have hope to engage in treatment. The words that you say, if you are a real consistent presence, can get them out of that position that they're stuck in. And there's a lot you can do on the relational level. So
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yes. Jamie, thank you. Thank you. To our listeners, think and pray on all of this. We will have an upcoming episode with Chris Russell from Destiny Rescue and talking about human trafficking on a global scale.
Awesome.
So we're trying to look local and then on a wider scale. And some of that will probably involve what you were referencing, what you guys call that guerrilla trafficking. So thank you so much.
Thank
Any
you for
final
having
thoughts?
me.
Yeah.
I do want to say this. It is so important what Momentum does. I'm going to out myself here for just a second and sound judgmental because I was, but I learned. I used to walk around for about a decade and a half saying, why would anybody ever be a youth pastor? Like, why would you do that with your ministry? In my mind, developmentally, that's not the place where, right? Like, we're adolescents, so we're exploring and we're underdeveloped up here. And why would you invest in that? And it seemed kind of fruitless. But then I came to RAHAB and there were 50 women on staff when I got there and I wanted to know them. I didn't want to walk past one of them in a grocery store and not know that they worked for me. So I set up one-on-one meetings with every single one of the staff members and I sat through 50 stories. And what came up over and over and over, and this is what taught me, I had to go back and say, oh my gosh, I was wrong. I told my husband, tell the youth pastor I was wrong. Over and over and over, what surfaced in their stories on repeat was they would identify adolescence as the crucial period in which something happened that introduced them to Jesus, or where somebody invited them to a conference or somebody connected to them. And it kept surfacing. They were like, I was 14, I was 16. I remember when this person invited me to this thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Like, regardless of the fact that they went maybe all over the place after that, so many of them identified that adolescent period as the time in which Jesus showed up in their life. And I was like, wow, that's such a crucial time period. And so just want to thank you for what you're doing, because I was unaware, even having grown up in the church, of how crucial that season is and how much impact you can make by being present and speaking truth. So thank you for what you're doing. It's significant. And I appreciate it. And
it's fun.
Thank you. It is fun.
It's honestly, I think being in student ministry is one of the most rewarding things if you can stay in it for the long haul. So that's maybe like anything, I suppose. But Jamie, thank you.
Thank you so much.
This has been amazing.
Thanks for
to
having
our
me.
listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. That'll do it for this week's conversation.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you found it to be valuable. And if you did, would you share it with someone else in your network who might enjoy it? Also, would you please go on and subscribe, rate, and review it? That way you don't miss any more, and somebody else will be able to find it too. Also, because we want to be your trusted resource, if you have a question or topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming episode, send that to us via email to info@buildmomentum.org, or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. You can find us there at Momentum Ministry Partners. Also, if you need more information on our ministry, be sure to check out our website at buildmomentum.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.